We are back. In this lesson, we are going to add the text box and the button. So let's get started. So before the entries, what I call entries, these lines of thought or text that the user has written. So before that, let's add a place for the user to type multiple lines. We're going to use the tag called text area. Okay, text area. You can close the tag as well. So this text area, if we save it and just refresh the browser, you can see it's right here. You can type anything. It's a very basic control of multi-line input. You can resize here. Anyway, let's add a button now. After the text area, open tag button, close tag. Now, the button in between the tags here, replace whatever you want to show for the button. We can say write or submit or whatever you want. Let's save it and reload in the browser. See the button's right next to the text area. Now that is okay, but how about the right be in its own line? A very basic trick you can do to make the button be a new line, just add a div, enclose the button inside the div. Because the div occupies the whole line, that button will occupy the space of a whole line. So it will break a line instead of being in the same line as the text area. Nice. Okay, so that's it for the text area and the button. Now it's doesn't look very nice. How about we add also styles? Now to style the page, visuals, we use CSS, cascading style sheets. Now CSS, we're gonna do following. We're gonna define what are called classes, and for each class, we're gonna define a certain combination of styles, and we're gonna apply that class to the HTML elements. Now all those tags that I wrote, we also call them elements of the page. We have an element there. Remember the element tab? So this is an element text area. This is an element div. This is an element button, and so on. So we're going to apply the class to the elements. Since the class will have a corresponding defined style, that style will be applied to that element. Now, you can write those styles in the same file as the HTML, but that's not very good practice. So we're going to do the following. We are going to create a new file called styles.css. CSS extension for the cascading style sheets. So let's start with the following. See, the text is kind of glued together. We cannot distinguish these three entries. Let's add a border surrounding them. How about that? So let's create what's called a class. Classes are created if you give it a dot followed by the name of the class. I usually like to use dash or snake case, meaning use lowercase, and when you have multiple words, you separate with a dash in between. So I'm going to say dot because I want to define a class. Let's just say entry, because I want to call each of these things an entry. Now you open braces and close braces, curly braces. I usually like for style. It doesn't matter if you have these spaces in between, line breaks or not, but usually we have a standard style. And the style is you place everything in a new indentation level. That is 2 spaces for me. So I'm gonna change the border. I'm gonna say border. That's the property. CSS property I want to change. Colon, and that's the value. So we have the name of the property on the left hand side, followed by colon, followed by the value. I usually put a space after the colon just for style. And I'm gonna say 1 px. Px is pixel, the unit of measurement here. And let's say solid. and let's use black color. Now, save it, reload the page. Nothing happened. Why? Well, I defined a class, but I did not tell it to use the class for the entry elements. So to do that, we need to first find a way to connect this style sheet file with the index.html file. And then we have to tell, hey, for the element corresponding to this text, please add the class, the style defined by the class called entry. Let's go back to index.html. Now, to link the style sheet, you have to add a link tag. So here, after the title, inside, under the head, okay, usually we place CSS link tags inside the head tag right before the end of the head. Right before the end of the head. I'm gonna add a link tag, and I have autocomplete in my editor, so I can just type link and tab, and it will autocomplete everything that's needed to create the link. Now, this link tag is more sophisticated because it has extra things in between here. The greater than and the name of the tag. Those are called attributes. So I have a rel attribute and an href attribute. So these tell something extra about the tag. In this case, the link tag is telling, hey, this is a style sheet and this is where you find that. Now the href is the location where it is. Well, this is wrong. So I put it in the same directory as index.html. So I have to say simply styles.css, and that will work just fine. That's the file name for the styles.css. Now great, I linked the style with the index. Now I have to apply the class called entry. Now locate the element you want to modify stylistically. These divs. Now you add what's called the attribute called class to the element. So remember, the attribute is between the opening tag name and the greater than. Put a space there and add an attribute called class. Now that's the name of the attribute. I need to define a value for that, and for that I put a equals be in between, and you have double quotes, and that's everything has to be in double quotes for the value. The value will be the name of the class, in this case entry. Notice there's no dot. Dots are just for the style sheet, because the style sheet needs to know are you defining a class or other things such as the ID or the elements themselves. You can do that later. Learn about that as we go on. Anyway, that's the entry, name of the class without a dot here, and it's applied to this very first thing. Save the file, refresh. You can see now there's a border surrounding the very first entry element. Now there isn't a bar for the others because we didn't apply the class. So let's apply the class to the others. Now that we know how to apply class, just add our attribute class to the div, class entry. To the second div, to the third div, same thing, space class entry. Very nice. Now all three of them will have border. Yeah. Well, it's not that great, right? They're too close together. How about we add space in between them? Well, to add space between them, we can use what's called a margin. So we have the box model is how you can think of these HTML elements in CSS. You can see at right hand side, there's even a box thing. You can see if I highlight, let's highlight the first entry. So it's highlighted here, I selected, I clicked on it, and it shows me the kind of box model here. And there's certain concepts you have to understand. And that's the concept of margin, border, and padding. Now, you can see I highlight this thing. If you can see the colors that correspond to the diagram here on right hand side, you can see there's a color of the very inner thing that has the number 688 by 36. That's the actual content, right, of the element. And that's what's highlighted here on the left hand side as I hover the mouse. Now, it's outside of that, there's something called a padding. Well, it doesn't have anything, there's a dash there, because there's no padding. Padding is that thing, that space between the actual content and the border. You can see there's no space between the actual content and the border. Now, that would be nice if we had that, right? So how about we try and add some padding? Well, we can try it right here. On the right hand side, you have the styles tab, and you have element.style. You can click here, and you can apply CSS styles on the spot. So I can say, let's say padding. Hold on, I can press a tab, and I give a value. We can start value 1 px, and you can increase as needed. You can see now padding is 1. Now observe as I increase the padding on the left hand side, the color green, if you can see the color, between the border and the actual content is increasing, and that's what's called the padding, the space between the border and the content of the element. Now that's too much padding, so I'm gonna dial it down. I just press the arrows, up and down arrows to change. I think maybe 6 will be fine for me. You could choose whatever you want. So I can click out and it will adopt that style. Now this is not saved, so be very careful. Because whatever you write here, if you reload the page, you lose the style. This is good for debugging in real time. We're gonna use it a lot. But make sure you always copy and paste this back to your actual CSS file when you are done. So I'm gonna go back to my text editor, styles.css. For the entry, I'm also gonna add a padding. Now the 6px padding will apply to both the top, bottom, left, and right. So there are other ways of defining padding, only for the top, only for the bottom, only for the top, only for the left, only for the right. And that's using different values right here. Right now, the values apply to everything. If you want to know how to apply in different ways, I suggest you go look at the documentation. Let's go there. One website that's good for web documentation is the MDN, Mozilla Developer Network. Developer.mozilla.org, very good site. Now I can go here, maybe I can do a search, and I want to know about padding. So the third one is under a web CSS padding. That's the one that we want. And you can see it has all the examples. You can see we did the first one with 1 value. There's the one with 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, and they mean different things. For example, this one with 4 is the very, very explicit one that tells you can specify the padding space separately, individually for the top. You know, let's see, top right, bottom and left. So that's the syntax right here. If you have 4 things, that's a value. The first one be for the top, second one for the right, third one for the bottom, and the other one for the left. Think of it as like clockwise, starting from 12 o'clock, right? As you remember these things. If you have 4, it's clockwise, starting from the top. Top right, bottom left. And there's the other ones. For example, if you want to just change the vertical one individually against the horizontal one too, you can use 2. And so on. I recommend you read this page and see the examples here. In any case, that is padding. Going back to... Nice, so we learned padding is the space between the border and the actual content. Nice. Now there's another thing. If I hover over it, you can see there's this thing called margin. Now margin is the space from outside the border. Outside the element from the border to the outer content. See, we don't have any padding right now. What we want to do is get all these entries a little bit separated, right? Because they're glued together from top to the bottom. So we want to add some space after each of these entries, except the last one. But it won't matter much right now. So that's called the margin. So let's try it out. I'm going to write margin here on the right hand side under the styles. I'm going to start 1px just to see what it looks like. And you can see it's adding space all around from the outside to the border. Well, that's very nice, but I don't want space all around. I just want a space at the bottom. So maybe I just want the bottom right. Well, I don't want to look up all those, ways of individually setting the margin. So you can instead do the following. You can say margin dash bottom. That's way you can specifically target only the bottom margin. So margin dash bottom, nice. So I'm gonna start from 1px. You can see it increases from the bottom. That's very nice, right? 6, I think it's still too close a little bit. How about 9? 12? Up to you. I will leave it at 12. Okay, that's nice. Let's copy this and paste it in our spread. No, style sheet. What call this file? There's no specific order for these styles, but sometimes you might want to order it in alphabetic order to make it organized. Notice when you define the class is dot for the class. Entry, open braces. I like to indent with 2 spaces. For n1, property and value per line. Property name, colon, value. Always end with semicolon. Don't forget the semicolon, very important. Always end with semicolon. Now I like to put a space between the colon and the value. It's like a standard CSS style that many people use. Okay, nice. Now we got it saved. We copied everything from our playground here. We can reload the page and everything on the right hand side will be gone from the element style and it will then appear under the entry. You're gonna see, and everything will be changed accordingly. You can see now all of them have the style because now it's part of the entry. Very nice, right? And you can play around with the classes here. You can remove a property from the class. If I remove padding, checkbox, you can see what it looks like without padding, with padding, without margin, with margin, without border, with border. Very, very useful tool to work with the style in real time. So I think for this class, for this lesson, we're done, and I'll see you in the next one.